around London. Well, joining me now are Douglas Murray. He's the Associate Director of the Henry Jackson Society, a foreign policy and security research organisation, and Ajmal Masroor, who is an imam at a number of mosques in London. Welcome to you both. We now have quite a lot of information about the man who perpetrated this, British-born, somehow radicalised, somehow identifying himself with Islamism at various points. What are the lessons or the conclusions you think we should draw from that backstory?
I think this is no new lesson for us as far as we're concerned. It started all from the 9/11 attacks when we started gearing ourselves towards tackling radicalisation and extremism, 7/7 bombing and subsequent bombings that we've seen across Europe. Unfortunately, things haven't changed. 10, 15 years on, we're still talking about the same thing. We need to really ask ourselves where and how has it been that we have not been able to deal a serious blow to this narrative, this mindset, this ideology. We need to think about why we as a society collectively have failed, how we as people, leaders, opinion formers can change this narrative. And that's where I am. I'm constantly thinking. I remember in this very studio talking about how from the pulpits I've been screaming loudly and screaming, shouting at people saying we need to rid the world of terrorism and extremism, and yet it hasn't worked. Have I failed? I believe collectively we've failed, but there is a bigger problem. The problem is this is not the root of the problem. The more I shout, it seems like nobody's listening. Something has gone wrong somewhere, and we need to find the solution together.
What do you think has gone wrong?
I think we've got it wrong. I don't think all the measures that we've taken to prevent extremism and radicalization is working. I think we need to go back to the drawing table and ask, why have we arrived here? I've just come back from Africa only a week ago, in which I saw every 20 seconds a child dies because of hunger and thirst. Poverty, malnourishment, illiteracy, lack of freedom. These are rampant problems in our modern world. So why do we have this problem? I don't know the answer to that either. It looks like we have less answers and more questions, and this means we need to rethink our philosophy, our approach, and our future strategy for this world. We're in a big mess.
What do you think the lessons are from this man's background and what he's done?
Well, I think there are some lessons, but I mean, they're all ones we've been around many times before. The connection to criminality, for instance. I mean, there's a very strong element in all this of people, particularly converts, joining because Islam is a gang in their view, to which it's good for them to be part of it. Provides a form of gang-like protection. So we've seen this in many other cases before. There are some things about this man's background that are unusual. I mean, the most striking is his age. At 52, he is exactly at the top end of the previous pool of people who've been convicted or carried out, perpetrated Islamist-related terrorist offences in this country. It ranges from 14 to 52. But there's only been one other person of his age who has actually even tried to be involved in such an act. So that's an outrider part of it. But most other aspects of this case are very familiar, I'm afraid, to those of us who have spent time looking at this area.
And do we just have to be defeatist and say, well, you know, radicalisation and encouragement of violence is just going to go on?
No, we shouldn't be defeatist, nor, I mean, I appreciate a lot of what Ajmal just said, but nor do we have to rethink our entire philosophy about anything. I mean, there's almost nothing you could do as a society to make sure that at any one point one person might not carry out some act of violence. And we saw this with the murder of Joe Cox by Tommy Mayer, a neo-Nazi extremist, last year. There's almost nothing you can do to completely safeguard your society from this. There are underlying problems which you can address, certainly. But I don't think that we should, and I think it's very important at times like this to remember that this is a terrible thing. It's very recent for all of us, but there's no point in throwing out our entire approach to this area. Our entire approach, the government's entire approach to this area, has kept the British people safe for a very long time now, much longer than some of us expected. Many, many thwarted, large-scale terrorist attacks have been thwarted by the security services and the police in this country. So the fact that on this occasion one person managed to get through is, I think, not a reason to rethink our entire approach to the world or to counter-terrorism.
Do you think any progress is being made with the community, if you like, in this type of behaviour becoming both more difficult and less tolerated?
One thing I've noticed unique about post this incident is that more and more organized activities have been brought together by people of all backgrounds, young Muslims, non-Muslims, Christians, Jewish people. All of the radio programs that I've been listening to, the TV programs that I've been watching, there has been a groundswell of the common narrative. We're not going to stand by, and it's not going to be in our name. That kind of a very strong opposition and condemnation. What I do think, however, is that we're not actually seeing a change in the global perspective, the troubles around the world. Middle East is still ruled by despots and dictators, for example. Most parts of the developing world are still not enjoying freedom as we enjoy it today in this country. We are still interfering in many of the country's domestic issues. Those things are not changing. Daesh has not been defeated. I'm living with 2 death threats, one from Daesh and one from the Somali pirates, I call them. And these have not changed. Boko Haram is still as crazy and as lunatic as they were before. So 10 years on, 15 years on, if we have
that might be an argument for actually stepping up the military operation.
Exactly.
It's not just the military operation that's going to win the hearts and minds of people. You see, what we can't do is do the same thing as the terrorists do. We cannot go out there on a rampage killing people. We need to change the mindset, the narrative, the hearts and minds of people so that masses of society would reject them, outnumber them in their thoughts and their practices, and more importantly, ostracize them, saying it's not acceptable at all.
But Ajmal, I mean, you know very well, as I do, that these are issues far beyond the competency of any one government anywhere in the world.
That's
the
true.
United States government couldn't sort out Africa, couldn't sort out poverty in Africa. Nobody can. No one country can sort out the Syrian civil war. What's your plan for Eritrea? What's your plan for Saudi Arabia? What's your plan for Iran? All of these places are ruled by terrible dictatorships, terrible despots. Some of them are Sunnis, some of them are Shia. All of them abuse their people. All of them carry out human rights abuses. And every time this country, and I don't want to get into a foreign policy argument, but every time this country does do anything, we have an enormous backlash because we've interfered. And whenever we don't do anything, we get the accusation. But I don't think, by the way, I don't think any of this, it's too early to say that this is to get into a foreign policy discussion. For all we know, this man may have had no interest in foreign policy, simply somebody on the outskirts of criminality or inside criminality who converted to the most radical form of Islam and then decided to carry out an act of barbarism in the centre of London.
One suggestion
we should
to
not
make.
Extrapolate. Can I just
Yes,
finish
of
this
course.
point? There's always a danger after any attack like this that people use it to get on to whatever their issue is. Sometimes it's foreign policy.
The Prime Minister did say that he had been a person of interest on the periphery of
absolutely. But
Islamism. So we know.
as I say, that it doesn't necessarily mean that his big passion was foreign policy issues. But it may be that he was simply another of the people that's very familiar in the radicalisation issue. There's just another person looking for meaning or looking for a gang, looking for a bigger thing in life than this society can provide, as it were, looking for ultimate meaning, and he decided to go for radical Islam. There's very little as a society you can do to stop any one person doing that. But there are things you can do to address the underlying narrative, and we should. I agree with Ajmal, we should do that.
Just one thing we could do globally. If this guy isn't interested in foreign policy, okay, let's brush that aside. But overall, in the next 10, 15 years, longer-term strategy, we can do one thing. We can make United Nations a bit more meaty, a bit more... let me finish. An organization that can actually have the mandate of the world's population rather than the big boys often holding it, often holding it in ransom for their own interests.
Ajmal,
we know that already, that United Nations could have done...
Look, Ajmal, please. A guy who's just staying in a hostel for a night and decides to go to Parliament down the road and stab a policeman to death and run over pedestrians. Let's not extrapolate this out into what I want the UN to do. It's only a couple of days ago. We don't know what the meaning is. Well, let's not just use it as a megaphone for whatever our particular hobby horse is. Okay? It might be a very valid hobby horse. But that's not. This is not the time to start drawing the manifesto on the basis of the blood that's only just off the streets.
If I agree with you 100% on this issue, I want to go one step further. I don't want to say I want to be short-termist. What's happened right now is wrong, and we need to learn from it. Of course, what you've said is correct, that this guy could have been on the fringes and all the rest of the stuff. But over the longer period, how do we eradicate the threat? I'm cycling down the street today. I'm in the underground today as I was coming here, thinking, if this train blows up, I'm going to be dead like everybody else. How do I stop that? I want to think about the world, not just my immediate. So the global picture is more important for me. If we can sort out the world together, collectively, by creating a new narrative where world is well, collective, democratic and free, and inclusive and fair, I think we would be a better place in the world.
I think
that may not come soon. Okay?
Of course.
In the meantime, we've got to make sure the British people are safe before we solve all the world's problems.
I have 2 children. I want to leave the world better.
Good.
I think
you and me
full
both.
agreement on that. Thank you both very much. This is